Okay, welcome to Gamespace. This is a monthly event for game developers and people interested in game development. It's hosted here at the Swiss Game Hub, which is a co-working space and incubator for game developers. There's bathrooms back there. There is a bar there, which is self-service, so there's a price list there, there's a cute piggy there, and a twint coat. Just help yourself, put some money in. And if you're interested in coming here to work, we offer very cheap co-working spaces. We offer a flex desk starting from 160 francs a month, which is ridiculously cheap. And if you have any questions about the space afterwards, feel free to talk to me. So on to Gamespace itself. I'm going to give you a quick overview as to what we're doing. This is the timetable. Right now we're in the bit that's labeled intro. I'm going to tell you a bit about upcoming events. The open screen thing is wrong. I should actually say news. Please ignore that. And then there's going to be a talk where we'll talk about the development of my latest game, Airships Flotilla. This will be in the classic Postmortem format. Upcoming events. We are doing regular events here at the Hub. The next one is going to be on the 20th of February, which is Thursday next week. It's going to be a pub quiz about games. Which is a new thing we're trying out. So if you want to hang out, chat to people, and try to guess some clues about games, please join us. Once a month, always on the last Wednesday of the month, we do game testing night, where you can bring your game and try out other people's games. And the next one of that is going to be on the 26th of February. And Gamespace is on the second Thursday every month. So next one's going to be in 4 weeks on the 13th of March. And I'll announce a topic for that later when I've come up with an idea. If you have ideas for what you would like Gamespace to be about, anything related to game development, please let me know, and we can do that. And then eventually, we will also have a big opening party here off the Hub. We only moved in 2 weeks ago. We are still kind of getting set up, as you can see from the tables that are standing around and the packages and whatnot. But sometime in April, we will have an opening party, and you should come. It will be fun. So that's the upcoming events. The new section is basically where we talk about what's been happening in the games industry, what's been happening in Swiss games, and so on. And it's really, in the last few years, it's mostly been the layoff section. So we apparently are having another bunch of layoffs at Unity. Last time I checked, it wasn't quite clear who was getting fired, but quite a lot of people. And Unity seemed to be kind of doubling down on the idea that they're mostly an ads company and not a game engine company. So we'll see. I mean, in practice, people are still using Unity. In practice, Unity is still usable. It hasn't horribly exploded, but it's certainly kind of worrying. And there were probably other layoffs as well. I mean, it's the start of the year. There's either going to be layoffs now or soon or whatever, as companies inevitably try to make their numbers look better for the earnings call. So that will be fun. But we moved, and we're doing fine. Mostly because I think none of us are listed on the stock market, so we don't have investors to please. Amazing, good stuff. Okay, so that's the brief intro. As I said, if you want to look at what other events we have, if this brief intro wasn't sufficiently memorable, we have QR codes there on the wall where you can join our Discord. You can also tell me if you'd like to join our mailing list. The Discord and the mailing list are the two most reliable ways of actually learning what events we have, because you actually maintain those properly. So you should do that. Okay, so we're going to get to the main bit, which is the Postmortem. So Postmortem here is a technical term. It's a kind of talk about game development where you look at the whole of a game development project and you assess the project once it's done. And you kind of try to figure out what went well, what went wrong, and how to do it better next time. So it's not meant in a negative sense. That's just what it's called. So as some background, I'm a professional indie game developer. I've been professionally indie game developing for something like 10 years now. I had one very large project called Airships Conquer the Skies, which is a steampunk real-time strategy game. And I just made another game in the same setting called Airships Flotilla. And that's a steampunky, survivors-like, or bullet heaven kind of game. So like Vampire Survivors or Potato, but steampunk. And that launched 3 weeks ago. So it's pretty new. The corpse isn't quite, cold yet. You can poke it. So this is what the game looks like. It's a top-down view. You've got your airship there in the middle, and you fight against all kinds of zany enemies. In this case, you're going to be fighting against a large number of like steampunk Borg cubes with flamethrowers and giant saws, as you do. And you have a series of waves, and you fight against them, and you upgrade your ship, and so on and so on. So what's the background here? I completed Airships Conquer the Skies in 2022. I made a DLC for it, which took a year to make, so that finished in summer 2023. And then I decided I didn't want to do another DLC because the DLC had done okay, but not that great. And I also felt like I wanted to do a different project. Both because I'd been working on Airships Conquer the Skies for a decade, and also because I wanted to kind of spread the risk around. One of the problems with the game is that it's based on really old technology, and I keep on having to do more disturbing things to it to make it continue to run on Windows. Like, recently I had to take the game executable and split it into 2 halves so that it would stop triggering an AI-based antivirus system that Microsoft had put into Windows. So now the game is just split into 2 halves for no good reason. This kind of stuff keeps on happening, which means that one day it will probably just stop working altogether. And if that's my only source of income at that point, I have a big problem. So I need to spread my risk. So this is the previous game, Airships Conquer the Skies. To be clear, I love the game. I think it's a great game. In a way, I'd be happy to just keep on working on it forever, but this is not very sensible. And you can see here it's a 2D side-on view on airship battles. It's kind of inspired by games like Worms, but more steampunk. So yeah, in the latter half of 2023, I was basically building some prototypes and thinking about game design and trying to figure out what to do next. I made some prototypes, like 2 or 3, and they were not really satisfying, they weren't really fun. So I played a lot of Potato over the kind of Christmas, New Year's period in 23. Potato is a game by Blobfish, who are another studio here from the hub. And it's kind of Vampire Survivors, but actually fun. So I, maybe controversial take, think that Vampire Survivors is actually a really, really boring, terrible game that just has a slot machine in it that gets people addicted. Whereas I think Potato takes that genre and makes it actually fun to play. And so I was like, hey, yeah, you know what, that would be kind of fun, like a simpler take on the same thing. Let's do an auto-shooter, top-down shooty version of my really complicated strategy game. And I was like, this is great because it's also a bit of a compromise solution. I retain, I have a game which I can make that will be of interest to my existing fan base. It's not a complete departure, but it's a much smaller project. It's not going to take 10 years to develop. And I did my market research, and at the time, despite the fact that Vampire Survivors had been a massive success, and Potato had just recently become a massive success, there was basically almost nothing else in that genre. So there were a few other games that were just not very interesting, and Deep Rock Galactic, which is sort of the obvious Vampire Survivors clone from a big name company, was still a few months away. There wasn't that much on the horizon. So it's like, okay, well, let's get in there. Let's make this game Potato, but steampunk. Let's make it in 6 months. Worst case scenario, existing fans of the game will be like, oh, that's a cute spin-off. Best case scenario, it does really well. It does as well as Potato does, so I make all the money, etc., etc., you know. This is Potato, by the way. You can see the similarity. It's not the same game. It's not just a reskinned Potato. Yes, I've also talked to the developer, and he likes the game, and he's not mad at me for making a game based on his, you know. But you can see that inspiration is definitely there. So in terms of implementation, just briefly, Airships Conquer the Skies was written in Java, which back 10 years ago was a perfectly reasonable thing to write games in. Minecraft was written in Java. Nowadays, I would not recommend using Java for game development. So I switched to Monogame, which is a game framework based on XNA, and which is kind of similar to work with. I prefer a kind of lower level framework over using like a high level engine like Unity or Unreal or Godot or something. And I made the vector graphics using Inkscape, which is a free vector drawing program. So kind of pretty open source, pretty basic kind of tools. In terms of marketing, another thing which I wanted to improve on was that for Airships Conquer the Skies, I did all the marketing myself, and I did not want to do that anymore, because if you try to do marketing for your own game and it's your baby, then every single rejection, every single unanswered email just hurts so much. And so I was like, let someone else deal with this. And so I asked Andre from Metaroot, could you do this for me instead? And he was like, yes. So that's what we did. We ended up co-publishing the game. After just a few months of development, so really I started in January 2024, we had a demo ready, and we released the demo and did a big marketing push just before the Steam Next Fest in June 2024. On the plus side, the demo was well received. The marketing push worked really well. We got some big YouTubers to really engage with it, and so on. The Next Fest itself was really a disappointment. We got more wish lists in the week before the Next Fest than in the week of the Next Fest. So the marketing push worked better than the supposed marketing push by the Next Fest. And part of that was just there were like 3,000 games there. So it was just, you know, we were like near the top of those 3,000 games. That meant we were like game number 400. Amazing. No one's going to scroll down through 399 games to find ours. So in a sense, I think if we'd done the marketing push any other time, it might have worked better. So yeah, that's that. Next Fest is very winner takes all, and we weren't, you know, among the winners there. If you're in the top 10%, that makes you a loser. You need to be in the top 1%, 0.1%. So there's that. But still, we managed to pick up some wish lists, not as many as we'd like, but you know, there was definitely interest there. Then we had a bit of feature creep. The original development timeline said 6 months. I added 3 new things that weren't planned originally. One thing was that instead of just going from one fight, just having a fight and then a shop and then a fight and then a shop, now there would also be a map after the shop, kind of like in Slay the Spire. You could pick where you want to go, which enemies you wanted to fight, which rewards you wanted, which I think does really add a lot to it. The second big addition was that I wanted to have an unlock system that was interesting. So instead of just having like, well, you know, kill 500 squirrels to get the squirrel gun, I made an in-game manual that was simultaneously the unlock system and also had this elaborate set of secret codes hidden throughout the manual, which you could figure out to unlock more pages of the manual, which was both really fun to make and I think actually ended up being very popular. And the last thing I did was I did a pretty large graphics pass in particular. I made all of the enemies explode in a lot of detail. So instead of just spawning some particles, they now created this beautiful, fragments and guts and so on, which took forever to draw. Detailed guts for all the enemies, just tripled, quadrupled the time budget for every enemy. Great stuff. Okay. So this is the world map. You can see you've got your set of options. It's not like Slay the Spire because it's left to right rather than bottom to top, completely different. And the idea is that you also get relationships between different factions, and these unlock variants of fights. So you might, for example here, get help from this faction to take down this giant robot dragonfly. And you can pick which version you want and which node you want to go to. So that gives it a more kind of long-term strategic aspect beyond just fight, upgrade. And here's an example of the manual. Quite a lot of fun making that, as I said. So you've got just your basic kind of stat stuff, but you also got lore, and you also have kind of implicitly in there, you actually also have a story that's being told that emerges from there's two authors, right? There's the one that writes in black, and there's the one that writes in dark red, who leaves snarky commentary on the first author. It's like, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. And there's cross-references, and there's this weird, fancy, magical symbols that you can type in to unlock more codes. And then I got sick. So I actually got sick repeatedly. I first really hurt my shoulder, and then when I had more or less recovered from that, I got some kind of flu or something like that, and that cost about 3 months of dev time, broadly speaking. And so in practice, the release, which was planned for September 2024, ended up being January 2025, of course, not January 2024. It did not slip backwards in time to take... That would have been nice. No, sorry, I did not unlock the secrets of time travel while I was sick and delirious. No, it slipped from September 2024 to January 2025, which means that instead of a 6-month project, it was a 1-year project, which isn't great, but still it's only a 1-year project, as if you're a game developer, it's like, wow, that's still so fast, And the previous game took 10 years, so getting that down to 1 year is a big improvement in my time planning skills and efficiency. So we then continued doing marketing. We did another influencer push pre-launch, and I also put in Twitch integration, because that was a thing that we talked about would be cool, that if you stream the game on Twitch, the viewers can also interact with the game and participate. And I think I have a screenshot for that, yeah. So the way it works is that you have your ship here in the center, and just above that you can see this little smaller ship with this progress bar, and that's the Twitch-controlled escort. So the viewers can say, like, go up, go down, go left, go right, shoot, don't shoot, whatever, charge the weapon, and it would react to that and move around and help the player. And so they could actively participate in the fight in sort of a Twitch-placed Pokemon kind of way. And that was really fun to make, and it was actually really easy to make. I was like, oh, that's going to be a big thing. And it was like, I had a working version in an afternoon, and the whole feature took like 3 days. So that was not an issue with the dev time. And Twitch streamers certainly reacted very positively to the fact that we put in the effort to make something for them. Okay, so the game released on January 23rd. It did not slip again. We picked January 23rd, like at least a month before, and we hit that target. The only frustrating thing was that I was also really trying to get the game deck verified, so fully green for the deck, for the Steam Deck, for release, and we missed that by like 1 or 2 days. The verification process takes a long time, and they go back and forth. It's like a console. Well, I think it's not as bad as a console certification progress, I have heard horror stories about that, but it's like baby's first console certification process. It's still going to take a while. And yeah, so sadly we missed that. I don't know how much difference it made, but I would have really liked to have that green tape at launch to say, And the whole idea was really that it's equal treatment on PC and on the Steam Deck. It's just as playable on both things. The Steam Deck is not an afterthought. And I think people did appreciate that. So, okay, how did it go? Okay, so the numbers. So far, in 3 weeks, the game has sold a bit more now than 5,000 units. We priced it pretty cheap. It's $5.99, and it was 20% off most of that time, so we can say $5. So you can do the math. It's done about $25,000 in revenue. We've got 132, I think now it's 134 something reviews, and it's like 93, I think now 94% positive. So the reviews are definitely good. People do like the game. Most of the negative reviews are, you're just going to get some. They're not ones where I'm like, oh no, I did a bad thing. Based on vague math, I would say the break even, so that I'm paid for both the fixed costs like translation costs and external assets and so on, and for my own time at a value where I can actually pay rent. The break even is at 25,000 lifetime units, which is plausible. It's by no means certain, but it's plausible. And the thing is, this is really lifetime. If it gets there in 5 years or 10 years or something, that's still fine. I don't need the money right now. I would just like it eventually. So we get to the post-mortem bit about what went well, what went badly, and so on. Development of the game, just from a technical point of view, generally went really well. There were some hitches with Monogame, which, if anyone is interested, I can tell you a lot of technical details about Monogame and its bugs, but in general it worked pretty well. Co-publishing also went well. It was nice to have someone to, do the legwork of marketing, and also just to have someone to talk about this marketing thing too. I mean, I can also do this with other devs, of course, but if we're actively working on the same project, that doesn't make a difference. And I think the manual with the secret codes, that was really a big success. As I had hoped, you have a whole bunch of players who are just really into it. There have been multiple people asking if there was any secret pattern to the coffee stains in the manual. There's just coffee stains in the manual. They are just coffee stains. But people were going like, yeah, but depending on the symmetry and how many distinct bits of stain there are, maybe this reveals the code. And this is exactly what I wanted, I wanted people to kind of do that crazy conspiracy theory thing. So that went great. That was fun. What went badly? So big thing is just, how I said, oh yeah, I did the market analysis and it's fine. There's basically no other games on the market like this. Well, in the year it took me to develop this game, the market went from weirdly empty to oversaturated. We had at least one YouTuber who wrote back to MetaRoot saying, yeah, your game looks nice, but as a policy, we don't do survivors likes anymore. Our viewers are bored of them. So it's reached that point within a year. There's so many of them now. And people are bored of them. It's, it was a low cost of entry genre. It was very successful, and so a lot of people jumped on that. And I wasn't exactly fast, all in all, Yes?
May I ask, did those Survivor, those games that were inspired, did you think they started the same time developing as you did, or did they just did they fly under the radar? Like you didn't notice them during the market research?
They started earlier, but they just hadn't been announced yet. So I think a lot of these games, the basic games had like a year or a half a year or more than that already accumulated, but just hadn't been announced yet when I did my research. And then like in the first half year, they all got announced, and in the second half year, they all came out. Because the subtle difference is that So I insist that my game is a Brotato clone. If you're going to call it a clone, it's a Brotato clone. Most of these games are Vampire Survivors clones. Vampire Survivors predates Brotato by like a year or more, and so they just got that extra year where, you know, they had more time. I looked at Vampire Survivors and was like, no, I don't like this game. But I looked at Brotato and thought, yes, I do like this game. But yeah, in practice, what I thought would be, oh yes, this is a great opportunity, just ended up being bad timing. I do think that if the game had come out a year earlier, it would have done better. That's life. Very specifically, I found the Next Fest very disappointing. That was probably kind of the low point of the development, because we were like, yeah, we got people really interested. We've got so much positive feedback. We've got like 100,000 views on YouTube, and then just sad trombone sounds as no one cared during the Next Fest. And yeah, concretely, the deck verification, it's not that I didn't try. I tried to get the deck verification done ahead of time, and Valve were also very nice about it. I'm not really blaming Valve here. It's just that it's this back and forth, right? You fix some things, you submit it. 3 days later, they come back and say, oh, we found these problems. You submit the fix a day later. 3 days later, they come back and say, oh, we found some more problems. And we basically had one of these cycles too many. If it had been one cycle less, we would have made it. Yeah, so that was just bad time. So, yeah. Things which were kind of mixed. The Twitch integration was really well liked by Twitch by Twitch influencers. But with, I think, one notable exception, it didn't really get much play on Twitch. There was eventually, after the launch, one fairly large, relatively speaking, Twitch player who played it and did really use the integration. It did really work. So from that point of view, maybe those 3 days were worth it. But apart from that, to be clear, people used it and they had fun and I really enjoyed watching them. But they had like 20 viewers, 50 viewers or something like that, which unfortunately isn't going to make a difference sales-wise.
But if I may say, the fact that we could say that we had a Twitch integration, I really have the opinion that it moved something with the events that they want to cover it,
yeah.
despite of what it was.
Yeah, so I think by and large I would still recommend it. Just weirdly enough, it's not the silver bullet. As I said, Bono Game as a development platform is mostly good, but I was developing it using on Linux, using the OpenGL target, and that one has some problems. Oops. And then the other thing is, the game doesn't super excite people. You show people a screenshot and they're like, oh, that's nice. Not give it to me now, and you really need to give it to me now. And so, yeah, just as an example, it's probably too small to read, but I'll just read you a review, and there were a lot of reviews of that type. I thought this was just going to be a goofy little game, but at the price point, I figured I'd give the dev the benefit of the doubt. I was incredibly pleasantly surprised. There were a lot of reviews like that. People were like, yeah, okay, I'll try it out. They were like, oh, wow, this is actually really fun. This is actually really deep. But, you know, okay, there's like 1,000 other Survivors likes on Steam, so did have to find it first and try it. So, oops. Charts. There's some charts for you. We love charts. So you can see the wish list. Here at the start, we basically have the demo release and then the Next Fest. I think actually these two peaks are the demo release and the Next Fest, and you can see that one is significantly smaller than the other one.
No, that's not true. The Next Fest is actually after those peaks. You don't even really see the Next Fest.
Okay, yeah, you don't see the Next Fest. You can't do it on the command. So you can't even. Next Fest is like the whole afterwards when less happened with the wish list. And then, around December 8th, I'm not sure.
Basically the first thing was the reveal. I think your community played a huge role in this.
Yes.
Especially in the first peak. And the other bigger peaks at reveal are some YouTubers that got a little bit late with publishing their things. And then the obviously largest one is the Bullet Heaven Fest.
Yes, the
Where
Bullet
we-
Heaven Fest, of course, was
yeah,
the
where
big.
we announced the release date and got
Yeah.
a better placing because of that.
Yeah, so yeah, we announced the release date during the Bullet Heaven Fest, start of December, and that gave us another big boost. So it's a much spikier boost, so actually we've got most of our wish list kind of at the start. And then finally there, that multicolored thing is that people actually bought the game and the wish list converted. And they converted pretty well, which was nice, because we launched with 12,000 wish lists, and we had after 1 week we had 3,000 sales, so we had a 1 week conversion rate of 30%, which is nice, you know.
What's the actual conversion rate that was listed?
I have no idea. I'd have to look it up.
10%.
Yeah.
Okay,
Now it's around 15, I think.
cool. So yeah,
It's the first one.
second chart, sales. You can see we sold a bunch of copies, and now it's sort of decreasing. There have been some recent bumps where we did get some additional coverage, which was nice. And a lot of the question now really is, how is that shape of that long tail going to look? And here's the player count. What's quite nice to see is that this is not going down very fast. There's a bit more player count at the start, but it's kind of stable. It's trending down, but it's kind of stable. So that's
There's
nice.
two bumps that you see, and there's one bump in the end that is quite stable until now. It's one German YouTuber.
Yeah, so we got. I'm slightly repeating what you're saying because I'm not sure if the microphone picks it up.
Okay.
So yeah, we had one German YouTuber who covered the game a few days ago, and that did give it another boost of several hundred sales and some additional interest. So that just has to keep on happening, and then we're good. Yes.
How
Yes.
big was the German YouTube?
Was, I think he has around 300,000 people on Twitch, but his YouTube channel, which is his second YouTube channel, was more the impact, not the stream, but the uploaded stream to YouTube. Maxime.
Ah, awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, the uploaded stream to YouTube, I think, had about 50,000 views or something last I
Yes,
checked.
he has around 100,000
So-
subscribers there.
So yeah, that converted into,
So it was not the biggest one, but still a big one.
and that did convert. Okay, so now we get to the learning. Oh yeah, so what's next? I'm working on modding support. Actually, I've just pretty much finished work on that. My previous game had extensive modding support and did get extensively modded, so I wanted to put that in as well. I'm planning to do one big update, which is sort of the update where I put in the things I had to cut from the content that I wanted to put in. And then we'll kind of see how it goes, and I'm hoping that we'll have a nice fat long tail and continued interest. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. So we get to the learning section. So number one, if you're going to do a fast follow, you have to be actually fast. So a fast follow is a strategy where basically you see, oh, this thing is successful, and then you instantly make something like it to try and kind of capture the enthusiasm for this thing. And what matters there is that you're fast, that you're the second of these things, even if it's a bit worse or whatever. It's just, oh, someone made this game and it's a fantasy game. Let's just make the science fiction version of it, within like 2 months. And in practice, I wasn't that fast, especially if you say it's a fast follow on Vampire Survivors. That wasn't fast at all. It's still not really a fast follow on Potato either, really. If I'd done that analysis, I could have done it at least half a year earlier. That might have helped. The second thing is that I kind of decided, I'm going to make that game. I didn't super duper validate it in terms of how much interest there is. That would have maybe told me, yeah, people kind of like it, but in a that's quite nice way. As I said, not in a this is amazing way. And this is something I really want to do better at. I want to make sure that the next project I work on is a project that people other than me, potential buyers, are genuinely excited about, and I'm just politely going, that's nice. Similarly, the screenshots and the key art matter a lot, because that's just what you see. And what you see of my game is, it looks fun. It's a Vampire Survivor style game. Yeah, we get that. When you actually play it, you realize this is actually really fun, and it's actually much deeper. You can't see that from the screenshot. This might be a terrible game that looks like that. You can imagine a terrible game that looks like that. So, having your own IP, because that's what this is, you know, it's not just for the MCU. I have my own Airships game universe, does help. It definitely helped that there was an existing fan base who was interested in the game, who was willing to give it a try, if nothing else, because it was based on the previous game. Also, of course, because they knew me as a developer, but there's also just opportunities to link these things up. And finally, I mean, at least in my experience, just don't pin your hopes on Next Fest. Don't think, oh yeah, and then Next Fest will fix everything for me, because it probably won't.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. I mean, it's always the way with Steam is that there's some magical way where you can get super successful and that works for a few people, and then everyone piles on, and then it stops working, and you have to ideally find the next magical thing, whatever that is.
It's maybe like the fast follow-up, yeah.
It's like the fast follow. You have to fast follow the Steam trends.
I think Steam also broke their own system. So we did the Next Fest in 2020, which was a huge success. We doubled our wish lists from like 20K to 45 in 1 week. And we didn't even do so much promotion. The demo was good. And then Steam made like 4 times a year to the Next Fest. And like everybody went to the Next Fest.
Yeah.
And that's the end.
Yeah, and as I said, I mean, I think how much did the last Next Fest have in terms of games?
Was it 6,000?
It's like 6,000 games, 5,000 games, something. And yeah.
And yeah, like this time we now put the Next Quest to get a publisher in the same year this in June. We got, I think, only like 15K wish list out of that, which we went in with like 25, and
Yeah.
it was actually really shitty. And also the demo didn't get played so much as the previous game and so on. It's just
Yeah. And simultaneously, I find, you know, I'm very diligent. When the Next Fest happens, I look at the games, and I find myself really, maybe that's just an age problem, but I'm really bored by most of the things on there. It's not that there's a huge number of really cool games, it's just a lot of games. Okay, so things I've learned about development. There's some very specific things. Spend your time wisely, I'll start with that. I'm not so sure that spending like several months, so I was kind of sick during that time, making detailed explosion graphics was really an optimal use of my time. Probably should have spent that time on some other things. You have to figure out, you know, what proportion of time are people actually going to spend with the thing you're working on, and try to put effort into the things that people are actually going to spend a lot of time with, and not like spend 3 days working on one boss explosion. Going up further, as I said, it takes, in practice, plan multiple weeks, many weeks for your Steam Deck certification if you want to have it ahead of the ahead of your release. They do care about things like minor graphical glitches and controllers working correctly and accessibility and blah 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 blah. They understandably don't want people to feel like games don't work properly on the Switch. So again, it's like baby's first console cert. It's not as intense as console cert, but it's the same kind of logic. And finally, one very specific thing, because I messed her up, is you should have some kind of system, ideally an automated one, but a piece of paper will also do, that if you put in some debug settings or some debug code, something into your code that's only meant to be temporarily there to help you work on something, that should not get deployed. I deployed one version of the game where I accidentally left in the unlock all content developer flag. So briefly, by briefly I mean for 12 hours, the game just had all the content unlocked. So oops, don't do that. And what I'm doing now is that I just have a text file open, and whenever I do anything to the code which should not get, you know, published, I will write diligently into that text file that I've done it. And before I publish the game, I look into the text file, I check all those places, and I clean up after myself until I can delete the text file and I know it's safe. The more sophisticated way to do this is that if you have an actual build script, choose a magical word like potato sparkle and just put the word potato sparkle anywhere in your code or data where you're committing some crime, and then have your build script refuse to build your project if it says potato sparkle anywhere in there. That would be the sophisticated way of doing it, which I recommend. We translated the game into quite a lot of languages, including Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Russian, French, German, Italian, Brazilian Portuguese, Spanish, German, unsurprisingly, Polish, English. I feel like I wouldn't translate the game into maybe that many languages again. The translation costs are somewhere like 5,000 francs, something like that. So something like 10% of the budget went on translation, which is a bit steep. But that's just because I wrote the whole in-game manual, and so there's a lot of words in there. Maybe don't do that. But anyway, so yeah, I maybe wouldn't do Italian again because I'm not sure if it's sold any copies in Italy. But anyway, gotchas. When you pick a beautiful, very thematically appropriate font for your game that looks really cool, make sure that it actually supports all the letters that you want to use in the target languages, because I found out that this beautiful font I've picked for the in-game manual, well, just doesn't render Korean, Japanese, Cyrillic, Chinese, any of this stuff, and so I had to do really complicated and annoying things for it to switch between different fonts depending on which language you selected. And it turns out different fonts have radically different ideas about what font size means. You would think this would be somewhat consistent. No, it's not. They have different ideas about where the actual baseline is. And so there's a lot of hacks in there. It's like, yeah, and if it's in Chinese, just render all the text 7 pixels further down. That sort of nightmarish stuff. It works now, but it was very English is a really stupid language to translate from because it has weird melted down grammar. And so, for example, there's a lot of verbs and nouns which are spelled exactly the same. Let's say you have a research screen in your game. What does it say at the top of the screen? Research. Then you select some research item and you want to research it, and there's also a button that also says research. Now, if those are the same translation string, then you have a problem because in pretty much all other languages on the world, these are 2 different words. It's Forschung and Erforschen, or whatever, you know. So you can't use that. You really have to differentiate between the purpose of your strings and be aware of the fact that, yeah, nouns and verbs are usually different. And of course, there's the usual things like, you know, languages can be more or less gendered and plurals and so on and so on. But yeah, and make sure you're not missing any strings. I also had a lot of panic running around where it turned out that I just forgot to submit like 5 strings to the translation company, and so I was like up the night before the release basically doing terrible things with Google Translate and copy paste to glue together the last like strings in what I hoped was Chinese and Polish and so on, and not just gibberish. So yeah, ideally, again, have an automated system that will tell you, oh, you forgot to actually translate that string. You know, you should have at least one computer programmer on your team, and so your computer programmer should write code that checks these mistakes for you. Okay. And yeah, that's basically all. You should buy the game, and you should also leave a positive review. I want that overwhelmingly positive review score eventually, so you all have to do your job. But yes, thank you. If you have additional questions, feel free to ask me now, or you can also ask me later if you don't want them to be recorded.
I don't remember, did you do a full launch or early access launch?
It's a full launch, yes. It's not an early access launch. I felt it was a small enough game that, yeah, what's the point in doing an early access launch?
Thanks a lot, David, for the talk. Really inspiring. I have a question regarding your scope creep. You mentioned that several times. So, what are your mechanisms to identify? Oh, that's some shiny object I'm chasing. That could be a part of the game, main loop mechanics versus that's really scope creep. I need to get rid of it. What are your personal experience there?
Okay, so the question is basically how do you distinguish between good and bad scope creep. So when I said scope creep, I do think that at least 2 out of these 3 things did make the game significantly better. I do think that the manual and the map helped a lot to differentiate it from Bert Hayter, but steampunk with different controls. And yeah, so I think it comes down to it's just the cost effectiveness question in the end is the amount of development effort you're going to put in going to make it so much better that it was actually worth doing it. How many people are actually even going to encounter this aspect of the game? You know, don't spend a lot of time on some weird edge case that no one will ever find. You want to focus your efforts where people can notice them. So, yeah, that's about as good as I can do. And your scope is inevitably going to expand at least a little bit, but if you can keep it under control, then your development time only doubles. So that's okay.
So may I ask?
Yeah.
So you basically ask your testing audience, what is it good, is it bad?
No, I don't ask my testing audience these questions.
But when do you know it's the good feature? You know what I mean? When
I
does it feel right to say, okay, that's worth investing in?
Well, I think about what I want the player to experience, and if I think that this adds enough to the player's experience to be worth it, then I put it in. You have to distinguish between, like, is it an intrinsic or an extrinsic motivation? Am I putting this in to make the game better, or am I putting this in because it would be fun to do? Because if I pick the latter, then I have to admit to myself that I'm a hobby developer and not a professional game developer, and then I can do that until I die of starvation. But okay, you know. But otherwise, you have to make decisions based on actually making a product. Yeah. Yes?
You mentioned there were some issues with Linux and monogame and so on, so possibly also on Steam Deck. Would you choose the same tech stack for follow-up game, or would you use it?
So there were issues. They were annoying, but they were limited in number, and I did fix them. For future projects, I wouldn't necessarily immediately go for monogame again, but it's definitely a contender. Basically, there are some bugs in the Linux OpenGL version that make the engine not work properly, which were not fixed at the time, and which I had to fork and patch the engine to fix. For all I know, they're fixed now. I haven't checked, but basically, sound panning is broken, and detecting whether the user has clicked on things is broken. And those are kind of important, being able to notice if the user has clicked on things. So I had to fix those.
How did you decide what languages to do and how many languages? Was this based on Airships? Did you know my user base is like, I have 50% of people in China, so I need to have Chinese in there?
So yeah, the question is, how did I choose which languages to translate to? To some degree, I pretty much translated it to kind of the standard set of languages. In retrospect, I kind of feel like I should have relied on my experience a bit more, because it's kind of the languages which I wasn't sure about whether they were worth it, turned out to be not worth it. But to be fair, so far they haven't been worth it, because translation is a fixed cost, and if the game had sold 1 million units, I'd be like, yeah, that's fine, we spent a bit of money on Spanish, who cares?
And when we also translated the demo, and there was not as many text as it is in it now with the manual that expanded the text.
In a sense, the decision to add the manual also added, I don't know, like 3,000 francs of fixed translation costs, because suddenly there was like 10 times as much text in the game.
But what you could do is to upload your demo and then look how many people from which countries are looking at it.
So, but at least for my games in the future, the languages which I would definitely target are, well, English, German, because that's easy, I can do it myself, and then Chinese and Russian. Because for some reason my games are really popular in Russia, and also they're pretty popular in China. So those are the ones I would pick. If I had to pick like 4, those are the ones I would pick.
One last thing about languages. If you only release it in English, then nobody can find your game in the Spanish store.
I mean, you can find it, But
Like
there
if you
are
actually
places-
look for it, yes, but otherwise
Yes.
it's not visible.
That's true.
So it's like, oh look, I didn't sell my game at all in Spain, or nobody played the demo. See, I don't need Spanish. Yeah, because nobody saw it.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you can also look at your competitors. And
Yeah.
maybe if you know someone, even ask them what their ratio in which language is and everything. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to kind of go back over here because I've been just looking in this direction for questions. You will get your time.
You said that marketing learning was not to rely on next quest, so you know what you would do for next time you have to market again.
So I would simply take the children of important influencers hostage and refuse to release them until they release really glowing reviews. No, I don't know. It's not that I think there's some other solution. In my experience, it's just that NextFest is no longer particularly useful, and I would even say that you want to avoid it being a major marketing beat because that's the time of maximum competition. Everyone else is also trying to make it into a major marketing beat, so that you're emailing influencers or whatever at exactly the time that they're getting 10,000 other emails. So I would just do your marketing when there's not an X-Fest on.
Going off of that remarkable question, so would you say, well, not to hold influencers' children hostage, but would you say trying to go all in on influencers or try to really focus on influencers should be maybe something game developers make, or should like focus the most on marketing, should focus the most on?
Yes, I think influencers are pretty critical with marketing now. I mean, traditional games media is basically dead. People. There are very few game journalists left. The ones who are left are desperately writing listicles, attempting not to be replaced by AI. They do not have the time or luxury to cover your cute indie game. It's not their fault. Their economics of writing about games are terrible. They can't give you the coverage. You can try doing advertising and so on. This can work in some circumstances. It's worked for some people, but it's also pretty tricky. Ultimately, you can do social media. That does also work to some degree. It's not to be neglected. But the big thing that really causes people to find out about games and be enthusiastic about games are influencers.
I would say that the lowest effort thing you can do is to sign up for Steam sales that are getting organized. It's basically the lowest bar you can.
Few clicks, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to find them and then fill out the Google form, and that's it. So yeah, and with influencers, you need just many influencers that you reach out to. That's more the problem with them.
Sorry if I may build off of that, because you've done the marketing, right? You said, so did you contact influencers directly, or is someone you went, third party you went through, or just every influencer directly?
Yes.
Okay. And it was
around 7,000 of them.
And you brought them like a similar proposal, or like was there some kind of cost
I mean,
involved?
if you want to go into a little bit more detail,
I would like
we contacted them 3 times. I contacted them always first with a quite boring press-like email. Oh, we are releasing this game, blah, blah. And then in the second email, I invite them personally, like, oh, now I want to invite you personally because we're so important. And in the third email, I'm like, now it's the last time to order a key, and through those 3 emails, we get some influencers. I mean, for this project, we sent out around 7,000 emails, 7,000 mails to influencers, so 7,000 x3, and we got around, we sent out around 300 keys, and of course not every one of those does actually do something. Yeah.
This is exactly the process I wanted someone else to do for me, so I'm glad you did it.
And it's vastly different for different games. So for an oversaturated market like this, it was harder to get as many keys out as we want to. For example, did the marketing for a Fluffy Land, and for a highly strategic simulation game, it was much easier to reach more people.
And there were some influencers, some YouTubers who had already made videos about the previous game and who were very
Yes,
excited
that
to
was a
play
huge
the next
part,
one. That
yeah.
was, again, so it's also the thing you do, you know, if you have an existing relationship,
Yeah.
obviously this helps a lot.
Yeah, I mean, also interesting was we write the first thing at the reveal. We didn't want to do the big influencer push, so we only have written to around 30 influencers that you already knew from your previous game, and this small 30 influencer push was more successful than the Steam Next Fest 7,000 influencer push. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Was there a specific order in which you try to contact these influencers, like trying to go from like small scale to big scale, or
I
just
usually
whatever?
go from big to small, but that's just a preference.
Yes.
You mentioned doing proper validation next time.
Yes.
What do you think that would look like, for example, for your next game?
So my current plan is that I have about 10 or so concepts for projects that, and all of those are games which I think I can make, just from a purely skill and effort point of view. There are games which I would be happy to work on. And instead of just sort of picking one at random, I want to actually make concepts and then see how people react to them. So one possible way that I might do this is that I make mock-ups. We make 10 mock-ups, one for each game, and once a week I post one of those to like Blue Sky, and I just see how many likes does it get. And then ideally, you know, one of them, people are like, this is amazing, when can I buy it? Goes viral, wow, and then, okay, I should probably make this one that people reacted really strongly to. Because, yeah, in the end, you know, people get confronted with so many games, so you need to have something where people are feeling immediate, oh, this is cool. And Lost Flotilla is that's quite nice, which isn't enough. It needs to be, this is cool. And the point is, these are all games which I want to make. I'm not just forcing myself to make some marketing-derived nonsense that came out of some lab, you know. These are all things I would want to make. But given that I'm not going to make another 10, probably not going to make another 10 full-scale games in my life, period.
It's only 10 years, David.
Yeah, if I'm really fast, yes, then maybe. But yeah, you know, I have to be a bit selective.
What would the mock-ups look like then? Would it be GIFs or screenshots? Or
There's different options at the moment. I'm basically thinking fake screenshots. So just, yeah, the game would look about like this. Or fake key art. Well, I mean, what does fake mean in that concept? You know, first version of the key art of the game or something like that. Yeah, that's the plan. So that at some point you might get a little gallery of 12 things to look at.
It's just because I'm curious. You said that the screenshot doesn't get people in.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any ideas or just any like things you think you could change that it would draw people in, or do you think it's just not possible for this kind of game to have a screenshot that works?
I don't know. I think the thing is that the screenshot communicates accurately what kind of game it is, but what it can't communicate is that, as I keep on saying, it's actually a good one of those and not a terrible one of those, like most of them.
Mechanics, it can't.
And
the mechanics work
yeah.
or not, it can't communicate that.
Yeah. And so that's kind of hard. And so ideally you want a game screenshot where people are cynically, where people would be happy with it even if it turned out to be a terrible version of that. But they'd be like, oh, this concept is so amazing that the fact it's actually horribly boring to play doesn't really matter. And then you also make a good game, you know, also make a good game. That's part of the advice.
So can I just, would you say it would be maybe a good idea to have like this one first thingy where you can make this really good screenshot, and it may not look like the rest of the game, but it's good as a communication device, like this slightly bounded area where you have the one screenshot or the two screenshots you need?
So I don't quite understand.
Yeah, like the game works and it has its look, but you have this one area which you specifically make to have good screenshots, which is probably the area people start the game in.
Yeah, I mean, that's very normal. I mean, the screenshots I put up for the Steam page before the demo was ready were very selective in terms of, I have got exactly those enemy graphics running, and all the other ones are still blobs. But that's normal.
For example, we accelerated the how many enemies are on a screenshot for the screenshot many times.
Yeah, you can, and obviously when you make a mock-up fake screenshot, the final game should still have something to do with that. Well, at least a little bit, ideally, otherwise people will be a bit annoyed.
So on Steam, you're not allowed to put any screenshots that are not from the game.
Yeah, the point is...
But I mean, how much of
socials?
Yeah.
How much of the game does Steam... Okay, let's talk about that later.
Yeah, it gets a bit specific, yes, other questions?
I'm curious if you consider the crowdsourcing the translation?
Yes. So, in terms of translation, so I wrote the English original. I've translated it into German. I worked with someone I know from the previous game to translate it into Russian, because I trust him and he does good work, and I'm just like, you can do that, that's great. And for the rest of it, we went with the translation company that Andre recommended, who I was working very pleased with. I have two problems with crowdsourcing translations. One is that the results are kind of inconsistent. Like with crowdsourcing translations, often you don't have the problem that translators miss the context. They've played the game, they understand the game, so the translations are better like that. But they are still not professional translators. That the verb tenses will be all over the place, the capitalization will be all over the place. That people will have arguments about how to translate this one word and change it back and forth. One person translates half of it, one person translates the other half. They come from opposite ends of the country, and their versions of the language are not the same. You can fix all of this if you have enough people to throw out the problem.
What we usually do is half-half, so it's community translated, but then you get somebody to proofread it, which costs half than if they translate it fully, and you have the context of the players.
Yes.
That's a good
So that's actually what I would recommend. What Philomena said is the best way of getting really high quality translations is get your community to translate it and then have professional people proofread it, because then you get the best of both worlds. The other thing, which I'm sorry, I also find it a little exploitative to just have people translate your game for you, because they're doing work for you, which you're not compensating them for. So the guy with the Russian, he started just sending me fixed Russian translations for my game, and I was like, okay, thanks. And at some point I was like, look, you're doing so much work, I have to pay you. This is now seriously getting uncomfortable for me that you've just done, 10,000 words of translation for free for me. That's, so. Yes? You were just scratching yourself. That's also loud. Great. Do we have any more questions? Yes, we do. Okay.
Maybe I missed one of the questions. But, so besides yourself, you developed the game. You had translators translate the game. Who else worked on the game?
So the question is, who else worked on the game? I'm one of those solo devs with a big asterisk. That is to say, I did most of the work on the game, but the key art was made by Dana, who's one of the people here at the Hub, who's not here today, and the music was made by Curtis Schweitzer, who is a American composer, also did the music for the previous game. He also did the music for, I think, part of the music for like Halo 3. So he's really big caliber, and I'm really glad to be working with him. Anything else here? The translations, as I said, got outsourced.
Then your father-in-law did one
song? And my father-in-law did one sky shanty for the game, which is like a sailor song. That was very fun.
Did he sing?
Yes, he sang it. I used that for the trailer. I think people were a bit confused, but and yeah, I think that's about it. So it's mostly me. I did all the programming. I did all the graphics except for the key art, so the splash screen. I did the sound design and the writing and blah, 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 blah. In general, the way I like to work is that I try to do everything myself, and when I can tell that I'm actually not good enough to do a given thing, I find someone to outsource that specific thing to. And because I already tried doing it myself, I have a much better idea of where it actually needs to go.
And so how much of the budget are you trying to recruit would be by paying these people versus doing yourself?
So the total fixed cost, if you want to call that, so that's mostly translation costs and also some marketing spend. So MetaRoot is on a revenue share basis, but we also briefly work with a Chinese marketing company, and we did also pay a number of small YouTubers to cover the game. We specifically didn't pick anyone big, but we just had these smaller ones we wanted to support. And so it's about 10,000 francs of, actual money that went out. That's an approximate amount. It might be 9, it might be 12. I'm not an accountant. And I would say I would need like 50,000 to, feed and house myself for a year. And so let's say the budget's about 60,000. This is all extremely imprecise because ultimately it doesn't matter that much. I just need to continue being able to pay rent. And so on the basis of that, I would say if it sells 25,000 copies, then that's, that's gotten back in. Yes? One of you. Yes?
One question regarding how you focus your work, like if you, in order to know what you should be currently working on, like kind of this ideal, what I want to do and what I should do, do you just like work with a standard Kanban board or to-do list or work with how do you schedule what you should do the next week or something?
Okay, so the question is, how did I do project management? So one of the big advantages of being a solo developer is that you don't necessarily need very complicated project management tools. So I think I've got my project management tool somewhere. I know that's some Chinese. That's my project management tool. So this is just a to-do list for the next bug fix. And it's extremely sophisticated. Each thing I still need to do has a little minus in front of it, and each thing that I've done has a little plus in front of it. And that's the tool I've used for the entire development of my last 2 games. Because whenever I tried to use something more sophisticated, I felt the user interface got into the way, so I just use plain text files. And occasionally I'll sit down with a paper and pencil and draw some diagrams to do the large scale planning or something, but mostly it's a text file.
So you said your next ideas are like 10 ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and for this project you want to do something small. For this, are the next ideas all also small ideas, or are there some big ones? What is your current plan? Is like, does the scale matter, or is it just whatever the player is most popular?
So the question is, so this project was about a year. And I have like a bunch of candidate projects coming up. Are these also small projects like that? And so it's a mixture between kind of small and medium sized. I don't want to do another 10-year project because that's just betting too much on one thing, I got lucky with Airships Conquer the Skies, it worked. But, you can't just work for 10 years on something and then it's a complete failure. It's not very good. So the projects I'm looking at have development times of like 1 or 2 years, or maybe 3 years if it's like a really big one, but that's what we're talking about. So not tiny, but certainly not huge, all-consuming projects either. Ideally ones where if I make it and it's a failure, I don't then, die. Have another shot at doing something else. So yeah, it needs to be doable without being a all or nothing gamble, I think. Okay, any last questions? Are we done? I think we're done. Okay, so thank you so much for all the questions. That was really cool.